What you see, the sun, the moon, the stars, they are always there. But a long time ago, one man looked at the sky and saw something different. He saw a new truth, and that truth made the world angry. Take a deep breath. Close your eyes for a moment. Now open them. Imagine you live in Italy 400 years ago. The year is Sexing-9. You walk outside at night. The air is cool. You look up. The stars are bright. You think the earth is the center of everything. Everyone thinks that. The church says it. The king says it. Your teacher says it. It is a simple idea. The sun moves around the earth. The moon moves around the earth. Everything moves around us. But one man does not agree. His name is Galileo. He is a scientist. He studies the stars. He studies the planets. He asks questions. He wants to know the truth. And he has a new tool. A tube with glass at both ends. He did not invent it, but he makes it better. He calls it a telescope. A telescope helps you see far away, very far away. Galileo points his telescope at the sky. He looks at the moon. The moon is not smooth. It has mountains. It has valleys. He looks at Jupiter. Jupiter is a planet. He sees 4 small points of light near Jupiter. They move around Jupiter. They are moons. He sees that things do not always move around the earth. This is dangerous. Why? Because the church has power. The church teaches that earth is the center. The Bible says so. Many people think that if this idea is wrong, then the Bible is wrong too. So no one can say the earth moves. It is not allowed. But Galileo sees a different sky. He sees a sky that is bigger and more wonderful than anyone knew. He wants to tell everyone. He wants to share his discovery. He writes books. He talks to other scientists. He talks to the church leaders. He says, "Look through my telescope, see for yours." Some people do. They see what Galileo sees. But many refuse. They say, "We do not need to see. We already know the truth." Galileo is not afraid. He believes in evidence. Evidence is proof you can see and test. He has evidence. He writes more, he talks more. And then one day he goes too far. The church calls him to Rome. Rome is a big city. It is the home of the Pope. The Pope is the leader of the church. Galileo must explain his ideas. He must defend him. He arrives in Nix 33. He is old now. He is almost 7 years old. His body is tired. But his mind is sharp. The church leaders ask him, "Do you still say the earth moves?" Galileo is quiet for a moment. He knows what they want. They want him to say he is wrong. They want him to take back his words. If he does not, he will be in great danger. He could go to prison. He could be killed. So what does he do? He looks at the floor. He thinks about his life. He thinks about the stars. And then he speaks. But his words are not what you expect. He says, "I will say what you want me to say. The earth does not move." But after he says the words, "The earth does not move," he says them aloud. He says them in front of the church leaders. His voice is quiet. His hands shake a little. But he says them. Then after he says them, some people say he whispered something else. He whispered and yet it moves. That means, but it still moves. Did he really say that? We do not know for sure. But many people believe he did, because in his heart, he still knew the truth. The earth moves. It moves around the sun, no matter what anyone says. The church is not completely satisfied. They do not kill him, but they punish him. He cannot go home to Florence. He must stay in a small house. It is far from the city. He can't have visitors. He cannot write new books. He is under house arrest. House arrest means you cannot leave your home. It is like a prison, but you stay in your own house. Galileo is old. He is sick. He cannot walk well. His eyes are getting weak, but inside his mind is still strong. He thinks about the stars. He thinks about motion. Motion is movement. He thinks about how things fall. He watches a feather and a stone. He asks, which one hits the ground first? He does experiments. He tests his ideas. He does not stop. He has a daughter. Her name is Sister Maria Celeste. She is a nun. A nun is a woman who lives in a church community. She prays and helps others. She loves her father very much. She writes him letters. She brings him food. She takes care of him. Galileo feels very sad. He cannot see her often. But her letters give him strength. Years pass. Galileo goes blind. Blind means he cannot see anything. He cannot look at the stars anymore. He cannot read his own books. He can only listen. He listens to people read to him. He listens to his students. He talks to them about science. Science is the study of how things work. He teaches them everything he knows. One of his students is a young man named Vincenzo. Vincenzo helps Galileo write his last book. The book is about motion and force. Force is a push or a pull. Galileo is very weak now. He dictates the words. To dictate means to speak and someone else writes. The book is finished in 638. Galileo dies in X642. He is 77 years old. He lived a long life, but he lived the last years in silence, in a small house, far from the city. He died alone, except for his daughter and a few friends. He never saw the stars again, but his ideas did not die. 50 years later, a man named Isaac Newton reads Galileo's book. Newton is a young scientist in England. He says, "If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants." He means Galileo was a giant. Galileo showed the way. Newton then discovers the laws of gravity. Gravity is the force that pulls things to the ground. Gravity keeps the planets moving around the sun. Galileo's last book is a secret. It is written in Italian, not Latin. Latin is the language of the church. Italian is the language of the people. He wants everyone to read it, not just priests and scholars. Scholars are people who study many years at universities. The church tries to stop the book, but it is too late. Copies travel to other countries. People in France read it. People in Germany read it. People in England read it. They whisper about the man who looked at Jupiter and saw moons. They whisper about the man who said the earth moves. One copy arrives in a small town in England. A young man named John Milton opens it. Milton is a poet. He writes beautiful words. He reads about Galileo. He reads about the telescope. He reads about the stars. Milton thinks, this man was brave. He used his eyes and his mind. He was not afraid. Years later, Milton writes his own great book. It is a poem about the universe. In the poem he mentions Galileo. He calls him the Tuscan artist. Tuscan means from Tuscany, the part of Italy where Galileo lived. The poem makes Galileo famous in England. People begin to see him differently. Not as a troublemaker, not as a man who angered the church, but as a hero of truth. Slowly, the church power weakens. People start to ask their own questions. They start to look at the sky for them. They build their own telescopes. They see what Galileo saw. They cannot unsee it, because once you see the truth, you cannot forget. In 1958, the church lifts the ban on Galileo's books. Lift means they remove the rule. People can now read him openly. It has been more than 100 years since Galileo died, but his books are finally free. In 1822, the church says it is okay to believe the earth moves. That is 89 years after Galileo was forced to say he was wrong. Very slow. But it happens. In 992, the Pope says the church was wrong to punish Galileo. The year is 9992. That is 359 years after the trial. The Pope gives a speech. He says Galileo suffered because of a mistake. He says Galileo is a great scientist. He says the church learned from its error. An error is a mistake. But here is the thing. The stars never needed the church's permission to move. They moved before Galileo. They moved during the trial. They moved while he was blind. They still move today. They move right now, above your head. Galileo changed how we see the world. Before him, people looked at the sky and saw perfection. They saw smooth moons and perfect circles. Galileo showed them the moon has mountains. The moon has craters. It is not perfect. It is real. And real things are more beautiful than perfect things. He also changed how we think about truth. He taught us to ask questions. He taught us to look for evidence. He taught us that the truth does not need permission. The truth just is. Look your hand. Your hand can hold this phone. Your hand can feel the cold. Your hand can wave at a friend. All of these things happen because of motion, because of gravity, because of the same forces Galileo studied. The same forces that keep the planets in their dance around the sun. We live on a ball of rock. It spins very fast, but we cannot feel it spinning. It also moves around the sun at 67,000 miles per hour. That is very fast. Fast enough to go around the whole Earth in 22 minutes. But you do not feel it. You do not feel the movement. Just like people 400 years ago did not feel it. You do not feel the movement, but it is there. Galileo knew this. He knew it in his bones. His bones felt the truth even when his mouth could not speak it. Imagine his life after the trial. He lives in a small house in a village called Arcetri. It is near Florence, but he cannot go to Florence. He cannot go to the market. He cannot visit his friends. He cannot teach at the university. Each day is the same. He wakes up, he eats simple food, he sits by the window. He listens to the birds. He feels the sun on his face, but he cannot see it anymore. He is blind. He lost his sight because he looked at the sun through his telescope. He looked too long. The sun hurt his eyes. Now everything is dark. He hears his daughter's voice. She reads to him. She reads his own books back to him. He smiles. He remembers writing those words. He remembers looking through the telescope for the first time. A telescope is a long tube with glass lenses. A lens is a curved piece of glass. It bends light. It makes things look closer. Galileo made his own lenses. He spent hours polished them. He wanted them to be perfect. Polishing means rubbing to make smooth. He learned this skill from his father, who was a musician. His father taught him to be careful, to be patient, to do things well. Galileo was patient with his work, but he was not patient with lies. He hated lies. He hated when people said things that were not true. This is why he wrote his books. He wanted to tell the truth. He wanted to help people see. But the church did not want people to see. They wanted people to obey. Obey means to do what you are told. They said, "Do not ask questions. Do not look through the telescope. Just believe what we tell you." Galileo said, "No. Look for yourselves. See with your own eyes. Trust what you see, not what you hear." This is hard. It is hard to trust your own eyes when everyone tells you something different. Think about it. Everyone you know says the earth is flat. Your teacher says it. Your mother says it. Your friends say it. All the books say it. But you look at the horizon and you see a curve. Do you trust your eyes or do you trust the crowd? A crowd is a group of many people. Galileo trusted his eyes. He trusted the numbers he measured. Measurement is how we know how big or how far. He used math. Math is the language of science. He calculated the speed of falling objects. He calculated the movement of planets. The numbers did not lie. Now let us think about you. You are learning English. It is a new language. Sometimes people tell you, English is too hard. You are too old. You will never learn it. They say, just give up. They say, it is not for you. But you have seen something. You have seen that you can understand this story. You are reading English words right now. You understand them. That is your evidence. Your evidence is your own progress. Progress means moving forward. Even one new word is progress. Learning English is like Galileo's journey. It is slow. It is lonely sometimes. People might laugh at you. Your mouth might feel strange with new sounds. Your ears might not catch every word. But you keep going. You look at the page. You listen to the sound. You try again. Galileo did not stop when the church said stop. He did not stop when he went blind. He did not stop when he was alone. He kept working. He kept thinking. He kept writing. And in the end, his ideas changed the world. Your English can change your world. With English, you can talk to people from other countries. You can read books written in English. You can watch movies without subtitles. A subtitle is the text at the bottom of the screen. You can travel. You can get a better job. English opens doors, but you have to walk through the door. No one can do it for you. So what can we learn from Galileo? He did not have a telescope at first. He had to make one. You do not have perfect English now. You have to build it. Word by word, sentence by sentence, like polishing a lens. It takes time, but it is worth it. Let us go back to Galileo's small house. It is a cold winter night in Wick 641. He is blind, he is weak, but he is not alone. His student Vincenzo is with him. They are working on a new idea. It is about pendulums. A pendulum is a weight on a string. You pull it to one side, then you let it go. It swings back and forth. It moves in a regular beat, tock, tick, tock. Galileo noticed this beat when he was a young man. He watched a lamp swing in a church. He used his own pulse to count the beats. His pulse is the beat of his heart. He realized the pendulum swings at the same speed every time. It does not matter how far it swings. It is always the same. This discovery was important. It led to better clocks. Clocks that tick at the same speed. Clocks that help us measure time. Time is a river. It moves always forward. Galileo wanted to understand time. He wanted to measure it. To measure is to find the number of something. He also studied falling objects. He dropped a heavy ball and a light ball from a tall tower. Some people say he dropped them from the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Did he really do this? We are not sure, but we know he did experiments. An experiment is a test. You try something. You watch what happens. You write down the result. He found that heavy and light objects fall at the same speed. They hit the ground at the same time, but only if there is no air pushing against them. This is called free fall. Free fall means falling without anything stopping you. Now, think about this. Before Galileo, people believed Aristotle. Aristotle was a Greek philosopher. He lived almost 2,000 years before Galileo. He said heavy objects fall faster. This seemed obvious. A stone falls faster than a feather, right? But Galileo asked, why? He did not accept the obvious. He looked deeper. He found that air pushes against the feather. Air resistance. Resistance means something that pushes back. That is why the feather falls slowly. But in a vacuum is a space with no air. A feather and a stone fall together. This was a revolution. A revolution is a big change. He changed how we think about the world. He changed how we do science. Now, here is a question for you. What obvious thing in your life might be wrong? What do you believe just because everyone else believes it? Maybe you think you are bad at languages. Maybe someone told you that when you were young. Maybe it is not true. Maybe you just need a new way to learn. Galileo did not accept the old ways. He tried new things. He made mistakes. He learned from them. He failed many times, but he did not stop. Have you ever made a mistake in English? Of course you have. You used the wrong word. You forgot a verb. You said good instead of went. That is okay. Mistakes are learning. Each mistake teaches you something. Each failure is a step forward. Galileo made mistakes too. His first telescopes were not good. The glass was not clear. The image was blurry. Blurry means not sharp. He did not give up. He made better lenses. He kept trying. He kept improving. He kept polishing. You are polishing your English right now. In this moment, you are reading. You are understanding. You are learning. It might be slow, but it is working. Let us look at Galileo's last days. He is in his small house. The year is 642. He is very sick. He cannot eat much. He sleeps a lot, but his mind still works. He still thinks about motion. He still thinks about math. His daughter, Sister Maria Celeste, is very worried. She visits him every day. She brings soup. She brings medicine. She holds his hand. She reads to him. She is the light of his life. One cold morning in January, Galileo stops breathing. He is gone. He leaves behind his books. He leaves behind his students. He leaves behind a new way of thinking. But his ideas do not die. They grow, they travel, they change the world. And 400 years later, we tell his story. We tell it in English, a language he never spoke, a language on the other side of the world. His story helps us. It teaches us courage. Courage means bravery. It means doing something even when you are afraid. Galileo was afraid. He was afraid of the church. He was afraid of prison. But he did not stop. He told the truth. Now you are telling your own story. You are learning English. You are showing courage. You are facing your fears, words you do not know, pronunciation you cannot get. But keep going. That is courage. That is the spirit of Galileo. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you felt proud of your English? Think about it. Maybe you understood a song. Maybe you ordered food in English. Maybe you had a simple conversation. That is your triumph. A triumph is a great success. Think about Galileo's triumph. It was not a loud triumph. There was no parade. No one clapped for him. He was alone in a small house. He was blind, but he knew the truth. And that truth was bigger than any punishment. After he died, his ideas spread like seeds in the wind. Seeds are tiny. They look small and weak. But they grow into big trees. Galileo's ideas were seeds. They grew into modern science. One man who grew those seeds was Isaac Newton. Newton was born in England in the same year Galileo died. The same year. It is like passing a torch. A torch is a light you carry. One person passes it to the next. Newton read Galileo's books. He studied Galileo's math. He said, Galileo showed me the way. Then Newton discovered the laws of motion. Motion is moving. The laws of motion are rules about how things move. For example, an object in motion stays in motion unless something stops it. A ball rolling on the floor will keep rolling until friction stops it. Friction is the force that slows things down. This is called inertia. Inertia means things do not want to change. They want to keep doing what they are doing. If you are sitting, you want to keep sitting. If you are moving, you want to keep moving. Galileo first understood inertia. He realized that a moving object does not need a force to keep moving. It only needs a force to stop it. This was a new idea. Before Galileo, people thought objects naturally wanted to stop. Now, look at your journey learning English. You have inertia too. Some days you do not want to study. Your inertia keeps you on the couch. But once you start, it is easier to continue. Starting is the hardest part. Galileo started his telescope journey by making one lens, then another, then another. Small steps. Let us return to the sky. After Newton, more scientists looked at the stars. They built better telescopes. They saw more planets. They saw farther into space. Space is the big empty area beyond Earth. In 846, a scientist found Neptune. Neptune is a big blue planet far from the sun. How did he find it? He used math. He predicted where it should be. Then he looked, and there it was. That math came from Galileo's work and Newton's work. 100 years after that, humans sent rockets into space. A rocket is a machine that flies very fast. It can go beyond Earth. In 9969, a human walked on the moon. That human was Neil Armstrong. He looked up at Earth from the moon. He saw our planet, small and blue, hanging in the black sky. Think about Galileo. He looked at the moon with a small telescope. He saw mountains. He saw craters. He knew the moon was a world like Earth. 400 years later, a human stood on that world. Because one man asked a question and refused to stop. You are part of this story. Every time you learn a new word, you are building your own telescope. Every time you speak English, you are looking at a new world. A world of ideas, a world of connection. Connection means being able to talk to others. So do not stop. Do not let anyone tell you it is impossible. They told Galileo it was impossible for the Earth to move. He knew better. They might tell you it is impossible to learn English. You know better. Do not be afraid of the small house. Do not be afraid of the blind years. Every great journey has quiet times. Every great learner has days when nothing seems to work. Those are the days when you grow the most. The roots grow deep in the dark. Roots grow deep in the dark. You can't see them, but they are there. They hold the plant. They feed it. Your English roots are growing now. You are reading this story. You are understanding it. That is growth. You can't always see it, but it is real. Galileo knew about hidden growth. He spent many years in his small house. No one saw his work. No one praised him. But he kept working. He kept thinking. He kept writing his mind. He was blind, but his mind was full of light. One day, a friend visited him. The friend asked, "Galileo, are you sad? You cannot see the stars anymore." Galileo smiled. He said, "I see them in my mind. They are more beautiful there. No one can take them away. This is a secret. When you learn something deeply, it becomes part of you. No one can steal your knowledge. No one can take your English. It is yours. Forever. So here you are in your own small house. Maybe your small house is your bedroom. Maybe it is your desk at work. Maybe it is the bus on the way home. You open your phone. You listen to English. You read stories. You learn new words. It is quiet. No one claps. No one says good job, but you are building something. Something strong. Galileo built a new way to see the world. You are building a new way to speak. A new way to connect. Connection is magic. You can talk to someone on the other side of the planet. You can share a joke. You can share a dream. Let me tell you something Galileo said near the end of his life. He said, "I do not feel I must believe that the same God who gave us senses, reason, and intellect want us to stop using them. Senses are seeing, hearing, touching. Reason is thinking. Intellect is understanding." He meant God gave us tools to find truth. We should use them. You have senses. You have reason. You have intellect. Use them to learn English. Use your ears to listen. Use your eyes to read. Use your mind to understand. Use your mouth to speak. These are your tools. They are gifts. There is a story about Galileo and a feather. Someone asked him, "Why is science important?" He picked up a feather. He let it fall. It floated slowly, he said, "Because we want to know why it falls like this and not faster. Because wonder is the beginning of wisdom. Wisdom is deep understanding. You have wonder. You wonder about English words. You wonder about grammar. You wonder how to say your feelings. That wonder is the beginning of your wisdom. Keep wondering. Keep asking. Keep learning. Now think about the earth moving. It is always moving. You do not feel it, but it is true. Think about your English. It is always moving too. Even on days when you feel stuck, it is moving, it is moving. Your English is moving. Even when you do not feel it, you are learning. you are growing. Just like the earth moves around the sun, you move forward. One word at a time, one sentence at a time, Galileo showed us that truth is real. It is not what people say, it is what you discover. You can discover English. You can discover new sounds, new meanings, new ways to think. The sky is still there. You can look up tonight. The stars are the same stars Galileo saw. Jupiter is still there. Its moons still circle it. The universe is still moving. You are part of that universe. You are made of the same atoms, the same elements, the same truth. Now, what about you? You have listened to this story. You have read it. You have understood it. That is your evidence. Your evidence of learning. Do not ignore it. Think about Galileo's telescope. It was a simple tube with two lenses. But it changed everything. Your mind is your telescope. It takes in words. It focuses them. It helps you see new worlds. You are the scientist of your own learning. You can experiment. Try different methods. Listen to music. Watch movies. Talk to yours. Write in a journal. Find what works for you. Remember Galileo's small house in his blind years. He did not stop. He dictated his last book. He kept his mind active. You can do the same. When you feel stuck, dictate your thoughts. Speak them aloud. Your voice is powerful. There is a quiet truth in this story. The truth does not need to be loud. It does not need applause. It only needs to be true. Your English learning is not for applause. It is for you. It is your truth. So tonight, go outside, look at the sky. The moon is there. The stars are there. They have been there for 4 billion years. They watch Galileo. They watch you now. They do not judge. They just shine, and yet it moves. Now I have a question for you. In the comments, tell me, which part of Galileo's story helped you most? His courage to tell the truth. His love for building telescopes. See his patience during the quiet years. Write A, B, or C. I want to read your answers. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to Learn English Through History. More stories are waiting for you. Each one is a new star in your sky. Each word you learn is a small step forward. You do not need to be perfect. You just need to keep moving. Like Galileo's Earth, your English moves. And yet, it moves. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your courage. Keep looking up. Keep learning. Keep shining. See you in the next story.